The rain fell on Seoul like a divine punishment, incessant and merciless, washing away the glow of the streetlights and the distant echo of a broken promise. The sky seemed to weep for something men had desecrated, and in the midst of the storm, a female figure moved with difficulty, stumbling through puddles and bitter memories. Yoon Ha-eun, wrapped in a now dirty and heavy white dress, clutched her stomach as if protecting the last fragment of love she had left. The cold bit into her skin, but nothing hurt as much as the emptiness opening up inside her chest. Before the Hansol mansion, the tall golden doors stood like walls between two worlds, that of power and that of pain. Inside, sheltered under an elegant umbrella, Kyung-soo watched the scene expressionlessly. The man who once made her dream of eternity now seemed like a statue, incapable of feeling, incapable of remembering. Beside him, Mirai, the woman in the red dress, smiled discreetly, satisfied with the destruction she had helped create. There was something cruel in the contrast, the warmth of shelter against the cold of rejection, luxury against the mud, the comfortable silence of betrayal against the desperate sound of truth. Ha-eun pleaded one last time, her voice choked with rain and tears. She said she was pregnant, that she carried within her the fruit of the love they had sworn to protect. But her words were lost in the storm, drowned out by the indifference of those who had already chosen to believe the lie. Kyung-soo looked away, refusing to see the obvious. The thunder that tore through the sky immediately afterward seemed to seal their doom. She fell to her knees, and for a moment the world stood still. The servants, motionless, watched the scene with downcast eyes, complicit in the silence. The gate closed with a metallic clang, and in that sound there was more than the end of a love. There was the birth of something that fate itself did not yet understand. Ha-eun staggered to her feet, her eyes fixed on the horizon, and took her first step away from what she had once called home. With each step, the rain washed away some of the pain, but it also shaped something new, a cold, patient, and inevitable force. The betrayed woman would die there, on that road. In her place, someone would be born whom time would transform into destiny. But when repentance finally came, would it be possible to stop the storm that never stopped? If this story has you hooked from the very first moment, subscribe now and activate the bell to follow every twist and turn. Leave a like and tell us in the comments, what would you do if the love of your life abandoned you in the rain? Before everything fell apart, there was a time when Kyung-soo and Ha-eun's love seemed like one of those stories destined to inspire movies and songs. He was the heir to one of Seoul's largest corporations, possessed of a serious gaze, a controlled voice, and measured steps, as if born to dominate the world. She, on the other hand, was just a young woman from Busan, with the scent of grapes in her hands and the pure heart of someone who had never known power. They met by chance when he visited her family's small winery to negotiate a supply contract. Fate, which often plays with coincidences, chose that moment to unite two worlds that should never have crossed. Ha-eun remembered that day well. The cold wind blew through the grapevines, and she absent-mindedly dropped a basket of grapes right in front of Kyung-soo's expensive shoes. He looked at her with a cold expression, but his eyes betrayed his face. There was curiosity there, a spark of life hidden beneath the corporate armor. As she apologized, laughing nervously, he found himself captivated by the ease with which she transformed embarrassment into lightness. It was in that laugh that something inside him dissolved, something that money and prestige had never been able to touch. The following months were a whirlwind of discreet encounters. Messages exchanged at dusk and promises whispered over glasses of wine. Ha-eun taught him to appreciate the simple things, to slow down time, to savor the taste of life without haste. He, accustomed to living surrounded by concrete walls and protocols, found in her the refuge he'd never had. When he decided to propose, he faced fierce opposition from his family, who couldn't accept a woman without an influential surname. Still, he insisted. And when she walked down the aisle in her white lace dress, weeping with emotion, Kyung-soo believed this was the fresh start he'd always hoped for. For a time, they were happy. They laughed in the mornings, traveled on weekends, shared small dreams, until the world around them began to intrude. The pressure of the company, the expectations of shareholders, the gossip of the tabloids. Everything gathered like a shadow between them. Ha-eun tried to keep their love alive, but Kyung-soo was no longer the same man who had been enchanted by simplicity. He had become impatient, distant, and the look that had once been tender was now heavy with demand. And it was in this empty space that Mirai appeared. Beautiful, efficient, always in the right place, and with just the right words to comfort the wounded ego of a man beginning to doubt himself. She approached with the care of someone who understands the game and knows the value of a moment of weakness. And so, as Ha-eun tried to salvage what was left of their love, a silent presence began to creep into their lives, a shadow that smiled on the outside and poisoned on the inside. What seemed like a fairy tale would soon turn into a field of lies, and no one could have imagined how much that quiet smile would change everything. Mira never believed in luck, only in strategy. Since her days as an intern at Hansel Group, she had observed people like one studying pieces on a chessboard. She knew who was strong, who was weak, and above all, who could be manipulated. And when her eyes fell on Kyung-soo, he immediately saw the gap. A powerful man, surrounded by sycophants, yet emotionally vulnerable. The exact type who mistakes loyalty for love and admiration for destiny. At first, she was merely efficient. She performed her tasks perfectly, was always available, and anticipated his wishes before they were even expressed. But behind her discreet gestures and professional smile, a cold ambition grew. Every compliment from Kyung-soo, every look of approval, was a seed planted. And when he began to distance himself from Ha-eun, Mirai knew the harvest was near. Ha-eun noticed the changes. The nights grew long, the conversations short. His cell phone, once forgotten on the table, now slept silently in his pocket. The scent of a different woman lingered on his expensive suits, and even without proof, Ha-eun's heart already understood what her mind refused to accept. Still, she persisted, making dinners, leaving notes, seeking out memories of the time when they were one. But every loving gesture seemed to irritate him further. Mirai masterfully deepened the chasm. She presented herself as a counselor, a friend, a confidant. She created subtle situations, innocent comments that raised doubts. "I heard Mrs. Ha-eun has been going out alone a lot. It must be hard for her, right?" she said in a concerned tone. That was enough. The seed of distrust germinated. Kyung-soo, overcome by pride and the fear of being deceived, began to see his own wife as an enemy. And the further he distanced himself, the closer Mirai grew. It was the perfect balance between fragility and desire, a studied performance. She laughed at his jokes, listened to him vent about the shareholders, and pretended to understand him like no one else ever had, until the day, in the silence of the empty office, their eyes met, and she crossed the line she'd been drawing for months. The kiss wasn't one of love, but of conquest. For Miri, that moment wasn't the beginning of a passion. It was the crowning achievement of her victory. Ha-eun, at home, felt her heart freeze without knowing why. A woman's intuition, perhaps, or simply the pain of someone who senses she's being replaced. She looked at the wedding ring on her finger and thought about how many promises could dissolve as quickly as a summer rain. And as night fell over Seoul, two women dreamed of the same man. one for love, the other for power. But what Mireille didn't yet know was that fate, as patient as she was already preparing the price she would one day have to pay for every lie she planted, and that this harvest would come much sooner than she imagined. The day began like any other in Seoul, cloudy, heavy, the kind of morning that seems to portend tragedy. Hyun woke up early, made coffee, arranged the bouquet of lilies on the table, and waited for her husband. She hoped that perhaps the silence that separated them would begin to dissipate. But when Kyung-soo walked through the door, what crossed his gaze wasn't tenderness. It was something darker, the poison of distrust that Mira vinha distillando por semanas. He placed the documents on the table, his face impassive, and asked if she was hiding something. His cold, almost mechanical tone chilled the air in the room. Hyun tried to smile, but it didn't find its way. "What are you saying, Kyung-soo?" she murmured, uncomprehending. He responded by tossing an envelope containing doctored photos onto the table, images fabricated by Mirai that showed Hyun next to another man, a company employee. "There's no more pretending," he said, controlling his fury. "You've destroyed everything we've built." Hyun, stunned, refused through tears, begging him to look her in the eyes, to hear her voice, to remember who she was. But nothing seemed to break through the wall between them. With each word she said, he closed himself off further. And then came the sentence that split the world in two. "Pack your things. You're leaving this house today." The shocked servants stopped on the stairs. The sound of suitcases being thrown to the floor echoed through the hall like thunder trapped within the walls. Hyun grabbed his arm in despair. "Kyung-soo, I'm pregnant!" she screamed, her voice shattering like glass. For a moment he hesitated, a moment, but Mireille, standing in the doorway, intervened with her sweet, venomous tone. "He deserves the truth, Hyun. Tell me whose child this is." The world seemed to spin. Kyung-soo snatched her hand away, his gaze filled with disgust and wounded pride. "Don't use a child to manipulate me." And then, in front of everyone, he opened the door and pushed her out, leaving her alone in the storm that was bearing down on Seoul. The rain fell relentlessly, soaking her white dress, the same one she'd worn to a birthday dinner he'd forgotten. Hyun tried to shield herself, but the wind ripped away every shred of dignity. She wept not only for what she'd lost, but for everything she'd believed to be true. Inside the house, the curtains closed, and so, amidst the roar of thunder, she took the first step away from the life she knew. Kyung-soo, behind the window, watched the silhouette disappear into the shadows. Something weighed heavily on him, but pride trumped regret. Beside him, Mireille rested her hand on his shoulder, feigning comfort, when in reality she was smiling, the kind of smile fate never forgives. And as Hyun disappeared down the road, the echo of her footsteps mingled with the sound of the storm, the sound that would one day return to haunt Kyung-soo's every night, because no rain ends without leaving mud. And his was yet to come. The rain didn't stop that night. He seemed to have made a pact with the pain of Hyun, determined to accompany her until the last trace of love was taken away. Each step in the mud was a memory sinking with the weight of abandonment. Her white dress was now gray, her pale face reflected the cold of the street, and her belly, where two lives were, beginning to pulse, was the only warmth left. She walked aimlessly, stumbling through the narrow streets of an old neighborhood. Cars passed indifferently, and the world seemed to have no room for another lost soul. When her legs finally gave out, Hyun fell to her knees, her body exhausted. And it was there, beneath the seemingly eternal storm, that she whispered to the heavens, "If there is a God who sees, don't let me die before I prove I can still live." The distant sound of footsteps approached. A flashlight illuminated her face, and a hoarse, tired voice asked, "Girl, what are you doing here alone in this rain?" It was Madame Choi, an elderly woman who ran a small orphanage on the outskirts of Gyeonggi-do. Soaking wet and shaking, Ha-eun tried to answer but passed out before the words could come out. Days later, she woke in a simple room, smelling of herbs and fresh bread. The woman who had rescued her sat beside the bed, reading from a weather-beaten Bible. "You were between life and death," Madame Choi said. "But it seems someone up there hasn't finished your story yet." Ha-eun's tears came silently, for the first time, not of despair, but of relief. For the first time, someone saw her without judgment. The months passed slowly, but with them, life insisted on blossoming. Ha-eun gave birth to 2 healthy boys, Minjun and Ji-hwan. When she held them in her arms, she felt something no pain could erase. The certainty that there was still purpose in what remained. Madame Choi welcomed her as a daughter, teaching her that a new beginning is not born of forgetting, but of resistance. As Ha-eun discovered strengths she didn't know she had, Kyung-soo lived the height of illusion. His marriage with Mirai was advertised in magazines, with flawless photos, fake smiles, and a lavish party. The town called them the perfect couple. But Kyung-soo's eyes looked empty, as if something, or someone, had taken the only living part of him with them. In the small orphanage, amidst children's laughter and ancient vineyards, Ha-eun looked out the window and watched the sun rise over the hills, feeling life begin again. The pain was still there, but now it served as fuel. And as she held her children's hands, a silent promise formed that one day, when fate brought them face to face again, she wouldn't be the same woman Kyung-soo had abandoned. She would be someone else, and the whole world would notice. 5 years had passed since that night, when Ha-eun she had been driven out into the rain. Time, often cruel to some and generous to others, chose to shape her differently. The wounds of the past hadn't disappeared. They had transformed into beautiful scars, marked by resilience. The once fragile woman now moved with the serenity of someone who had learned to live without needing applause. In the fields of Gyeonggi-do, among vineyards tended with her own hands, she built her refuge. With the help of Madame Choi, rebuilt the old woman's family's old winery and transformed it into something that would soon attract the attention of the entire country, Choi and Sons Winery. The name was a tribute to the woman who had saved her, and to the 2 boys who now ran around the courtyard, laughing as if they had never known pain. Ha-eun's days were long, but full of purpose. She woke before the sun, organized the harvest, welcomed buyers, and personally cared for each bottle produced. Over time, her wines began to win international awards. The brand that had been born of abandonment was now synonymous with purity and excellence. Each label carried a silent message. From pain, the rarest of flavors is born. As Ha-eun rebuilt her life away from the bright lights of Seoul, Kyung-soo followed the opposite path. Hansol Group grew, but its heart became a barren land. The marriage with Mirai, which once seemed like a trophy, began to deteriorate. She demanded more power, more money, more control. And he, tired of the lies and the coldness, found peace only in her. Silences. Sometimes in the early hours of the morning when sleep abandoned him, he would find himself looking out the window, wondering where Ha-eun was, and why, even after everything, the sound of the rain still reminded him of her. On the other hand, Ha-eun learned to accept the past without letting it consume her. She created Min Junan Ji-hwan with love and firmness, teaching them that dignity is the most valuable inheritance anyone can leave. At night, he watched them sleep and felt something grow inside him, not hatred, but a kind of quiet power, the power of those who know how to wait. Then, on a quiet afternoon, the phone rang. An elegant voice on the other end introduced itself on behalf of Hansol Group. They wanted to propose a partnership to distribute Choi and Son's wines at corporate events. Hyun listened to every word calmly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Fate, apparently, had decided to knock on her door again. And as she hung up the phone, a faint smile formed on her lips. The time for hiding was over. Soon, Seoul would once again speak the name she once tried to erase, and this time, no one would come away unscathed. The main hall of the Seoul International Center was filled with golden lights and suppressed laughter. It was the Global Wine and Export Conference, the industry's most prestigious event, bringing together business people and tycoons from across the country. In the center of that luxurious setting, Kyung-soo walked among politicians and investors with the same incalculated expression that always accompanied him. At his side, Mirai, impeccable in a crimson dress, smiled for the cameras as if her life were perfect. No one there imagined that, behind that smile, their marriage was already a silent ruin about to collapse. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, a different presence stood out, not for its brilliance, but for its serenity. Hyun, now known as Madame Choi, observed everything from a distance, her hair tied in an elegant bun, her confident gaze, and her firm posture made her a figure that commanded respect. No trace remained of the woman who had once begged in the rain. She was someone else, untouchable, mysterious. The name Choi and Son's Winery was plastered across the event's screens, hailed by critics as the revelation of the year. When Hyun took the stage to speak, the murmur in the auditorium died down. Her voice was soft but firm. She spoke of perseverance, the value of roots, how wine, like life, needs the right time to blossom. After being crushed, every word seemed written to wound and heal at the same time. Kyung-soo, seated among the guests, looked up at the stage, and the world stopped. For a moment, he didn't recognize what he saw, but there was something about that timbre, the way she held the microphone, that awakened memories he'd thought buried. When she looked at him, and only looked at him, the air seemed thin. The time between them compressed into an eternal second. Mira noticed the immediate discomfort. His smile faltered, and his icy hand tightened on Kyung-soo's arm. "Do you know her?" he asked through gritted teeth. He was slow to answer. "No," he murmured, but his hesitant tone betrayed him. After her speech, Ha-eun descended from the stage with the elegance of someone who owed nothing to the past. She greeted business people, smiled at journalists, and passed a few meters away from Kyung-soo. He tried to hide it, but his gaze betrayed him. She noticed. She paused for a brief moment, turned her face toward him, and with a slight, almost imperceptible smile, she let time take its toll. No words were spoken, but the exchange of glances was enough. It was enough to make him feel the weight of all the nights he'd slept without peace, and also enough to make her realize something unexpected. Her heart still recognized that man, but now, not as love, but as the past. Mirai, suffocated by fear, realized the invisible danger that had just entered their lives. She knew the look of a wounded woman, and she knew that behind that calm lurked a force that could destroy everything she had built. And as the camera flashes lit up the room, Kyung-soo tried to figure out if what he felt was regret or the omen that fate had just reopened the wound he'd pretended to forget. The reunion had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the conference dawned cold and silent. High in the hills of Gyeonggi-do, the sun filtered through the clouds and poured over the vineyards of Choi and Son's Winery, where life flowed at a simple and pure pace. The two boys, Minju Nanji Hwan, they played among the grapevines, laughing loudly as the wind swayed the branches. Neither of them knew the weight of the history that slept beneath that soil, the same soil that once held their mother's tears. Ha-eun watched her children with a small smile. Their strength was a reflection of her own. Every gesture, every laugh was a reminder that she had overcome the impossible. But something inside her was still restless from their reunion the night before. The look in her eyes, Kyung-soo, that look lost between regret and guilt, still haunted her. Part of her wanted to forget him, another part wanted him to know what he'd lost. Fate, as always, seemed poised to intervene. That afternoon, a black car drove up the dirt road toward the winery. Ha-eun was meeting with investors when the driver pulled up. And when the door opened, time sighed again. Kyung-soo got out of the vehicle, accompanied by two assistants. He came on behalf of Seoul Group, but his visit carried more intentions than a commercial contract could justify. Seeing him enter the main hall, Ha-eun maintained her composure. Her calm voice contrasted with the discomfort that dominated the room. He, in turn, seemed disconcerted by the woman he once thought fragile, now commanding everything with precision. "Ms. Choi, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person," he said, trying to hide his nervousness. Ha-eun responded with a slight nod, as if greeting a random stranger. While they were talking about business, Min Junanji Hwan, they came running in, carrying baskets of grapes. The sight made Kyung-soo look away. The boys had the same smiles he'd seen in the mirror as a child. Something inside him stirred, an old memory, a dormant instinct. He bent down to greet them, and for an instant, the three stood face to face, father and sons, united by chance, unaware that blood already bound them. Ha-eun watched the scene from a distance, her heart torn between tenderness and pain. Life, once again, showed its cruel humor. The man who had rejected her now smiled at the children she had never recognized. As Kyung-soo's car drove off at dusk, Ha-eun stood at the door, listening to the wind blow through the vineyards. Her gaze was calm, but inside, something was stirring. Because fate, when it decides to right wrongs, always begins subtly. And that afternoon, as the sun sank behind the hills, the web of karma began to close, and the first to feel fate's cold touch wouldn't be Ha-eun, but Mireille. The empire that Mireille built on lies began to crumble silently, like a crack opening in a wall before it collapses. It all started with an intercepted email, an undeclared embezzlement of funds, a forged signature. The finance department of Seoul Group began to suspect, and within days, the years-long farce turned into a storm of scandals. The newspaper headlines were relentless. Seoul Vice President investigated for corporate fraud. Mirai involved in embezzlement and international contract manipulation. Her photos, once a symbol of elegance and power, now illustrated her decline. And while reporters hunted her left and right, Kyung-soo watched everything in silence, his eyes sunk in a mixture of anger and disbelief. When he confronted Mireille at home, she still tried to use the same charm that had so often fooled him. "You don't understand, Kyung-soo. I did this for us, for the company." But his voice cut through the air like a blade. "You did it for yourself, just like you did when you destroyed the woman who truly loved me." For the first time, she realized the man before her was no longer manipulable. His gaze held no hatred, it held emptiness. And emptiness is the worst kind of goodbye. The evidence surfaced one after another. Deposits into secret accounts, inflated contracts, even old message logs that revealed how she had framed Ha-eun. The mask finally fell. At a press conference, Kyung-soo publicly admitted responsibility for entrusting her with positions and signatures. And while he demeaned himself in front of the cameras, Mirai disappeared from the country, taking what was left of the money and leaving only destruction behind. The company's shares plummeted, investors walked away, and the name Seoul, once synonymous with power, became a symbol of shame. For the first time, Kyung-soo experienced the bitter taste of helplessness, the same one he had once inflicted on Ha-eun. The irony of fate was too cruel to be coincidence. That night, he returned to the old mansion. The rain was falling again, as if the past insisted on repeating the scene of sin. He walked to the same gate where he had once driven her away and stood there motionless, feeling the weight of all he had lost. But fate hadn't finished its lesson yet. Because the true punishment of a repentant man isn't ruin. It's the moment he looks into the face of the one he destroyed and realizes she no longer hates him. She's simply forgotten him. The man who had once been synonymous with power now walked the streets like a ghost among the living. Kyung-soo, once feared and admired, was just another face lost among umbrellas. The wrinkled collar of his suit, his weary gaze and his trembling hands betrayed a burden no amount of money could alleviate. The empire he had built had crumbled, and with it, his very identity. But what haunted him most wasn't Hansol's bankruptcy. It was the echo of a voice he had been trying to silence for years. Kyung-soo, these are your children. The sound of the rain that night seemed the same as the night when it all began. And perhaps that was why his steps, guided more by regret than reason, led him to the winery gates. Choi and Sons. The cold wind buffeted him as if fate were making him relive every mistake. When Ha-eun appeared at the top of the stone stairs, time stood still. She said nothing. She just looked at him with the same serene gaze of someone who has overcome hatred. Kyung-soo tried to speak, but the words stuck. He approached slowly, his eyes brimming with tears. I didn't come to ask for anything. I just needed to see you and tell you that I finally understand. His voice cracked as if each syllable carried the weight of 5 years of guilt. Ha-eun remained still, her face expressionless, her silence more cutting than any answer. Then he fell to his knees in the mud that formed under the rain. I destroyed the purest thing in me, and that was you. The scene was a mirror image of that night of expulsion. Now he was the one standing in the rain, begging. Tears mingled with the water running down his face. Ha-eun approached slowly, observing the man she once believed invincible. There was pity, perhaps compassion, but no trace of love. The rain purified me, Kyung-soo, but you still carry the mud. The words came out soft, yet sharp, as a blade of glass. He lowered his head, defenseless, and when he finally looked up, he saw 2 small silhouettes watching from a distance, 2 boys with the same eyes that had stared back at him in the mirror every morning of his youth. Fate, merciless and exact, had chosen that moment to reveal its final irony. And as Ha-eun turned to call her children, Kyung-soo realized that the past he tried to erase had blood, a voice, and a face. He just didn't know yet that in recognizing his lost love, he would discover what time had mercilessly stolen from him. The very heirs to his name. The wind cut through the air with the delicacy of an ancient memory. Kyung-soo, he was kneeling at the entrance to the winery, the rain running down his face, when he heard light footsteps approaching. 2 boys stopped in front of him, curious, unaware that they were standing before the man who had given them life. Minjun and Ji-hwan, with their clothes soaked and their eyes innocent, watched the stranger in the dark suit with a mixture of pity and fascination. Ha-eun approached slowly, placing her hand on her son's shoulders. "Come in, boys," she said calmly. But Ji-hwan, the most curious, didn't move. "Mom, why is he crying?" The innocent question pierced Kyung-soo like an invisible blade. He tried to smile, but his voice betrayed him. Because sometimes, son, adults take a while to understand the value of the things they lose. Ha-eun looked away, trying to remain calm, but her heart wavered. For a moment, the 3 of them, mother, father, and children, were caught in a silence that seemed suspended in time. Then Min-jun, the most reserved, stepped forward. "Sir, would you like to take shelter from the rain?" The boy's pure kindness dispelled any remaining pride in Kyung-soo. He accepted, following them to the balcony where the drops beat rhythmically on the roof, like the echo of a destiny being rewritten. Inside the house, children's laughter broke the tension. The boys talked about school, grapes, dreams of a future they hadn't yet seen. Kyung-soo listened with teary eyes, each word a reflection of what time had stolen from him. Ha-eun, silent, watched from afar. She knew that moment was inevitable, the confrontation between past and present. When the children went upstairs to change, he approached her hesitantly. "They are wonderful." Ha-eun took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the stairs. "Yes, they are. They're the only good part of what once existed between us." The confession hung in the air, thick and bitter. Kyung-soo closed his eyes, feeling the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Ha-eun, they're mine, aren't they?" Her silence was the most devastating answer. She didn't need to confirm. His face transformed. The tears came, slow, sincere, heavy. 5 years, he whispered. 5 years without knowing he had 2 children. Ha-eun watched him silently. There was compassion, but also distance. He had tried to kill the love within her, and now fate made him live with the absence of his own blood. And as the boys' laughter echoed upstairs, Kyung-soo realized that forgiveness wasn't something to be asked for, but something to be earned, and that earning it was still a long way off. Time would give him the chance to prove whether he had truly learned to be a father or whether he would remain just a regretful man. The years passed like the wind through the vineyards at dawn, steady, silent, and full of stories that only time can understand. Life no longer held the same brilliance as before, but it also no longer carried the weight of pain. There was a new serenity in everything, a calm that came not from the absence of memories, but from the acceptance of them. Kyung-soo, now with grey hair and a calm gaze, spent his days among the vines of Choi and Son's winery. Of suit and ambition, only memory remained. He had traded glass offices for green hills, speeches calculated by the sound of cicadas, and the once absolute power for the simplicity of honest work. With each harvest, he immersed his hands in the soil with the same respect of someone seeking redemption. There was no longer haste in his steps, no arrogance in his voice. Everything that had once been a symbol of vanity had become purpose. The boys from the winery followed him everywhere, curious and enchanted by the stories he told about the past, stories that didn't hide mistakes, but treated them as lessons. They admired him not for what he possessed, but for what he had learned to lose. With them, Kyung-soo rediscovered the joy of teaching, the pleasure of listening, and the value of presence. He no longer tried to control destiny, simply understanding that it has its own rhythm and that no pain is eternal if one chooses to learn from it. Ha-eun, for her part, watched everything from afar. At first, she avoided getting close. Pride and fear walked side by side in her heart. She feared his regret was merely a reflection of a weary conscience, not a true transformation. But over time, actions spoke louder than any words. Kyung-soo never tried to justify himself, nor regain what he lost. He simply stayed. And staying, she learned, is the most silent and sincere form of love. Afternoons at the winery became a ritual. Ha-eun worked on reports while gazing out the window at the fields. The sound of children's laughter mingled with birdsong and the sweet scent of ripe grapes. Life, which had once seemed like a prison, now had the rhythm of a light, almost forgotten song. And in each note, there was a lesson that suffering had taught her. You don't have to forget to move forward. You just have to transform pain into wisdom. As the months passed, Choi and Son's winery prospered. It became a benchmark for quality and resilience, admired not only for its award-winning wines, but also for the story behind each bottle. Journalists and tourists flocked to meet the woman who built an empire from the ashes, unaware that each grape harvested also bore the taste of a life rebuilt. Ha-eun no longer lived. Driven by revenge or bitter memories, her strength now came from gratitude for having survived, for having loved, and above all, for having learned to forgive without losing herself. One afternoon, the sky began to change color. The wind brought the damp scent of approaching rain, and the horizon was covered in heavy clouds. The workers hurried to gather their tools, and the children ran laughing between the rows of vines, trying to catch the first falling drops. Kyung-soo was among them. Laughing too, his face wet and his heart light. When he looked up, he saw Ha-eun on the balcony, watching the scene with a restrained smile. The same serene smile he had once destroyed, and which now silently forgave him. The rain thickened, covering the field with a delicate mist. Kyung-soo walked to the porch, his steps slow, steady, and full of meaning. He carried an umbrella in his hands, but as he approached, he chose to open it over the boys and Ha-eun. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of everything words could never say. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. He looked into her eyes and, his voice breaking, murmured, "Thank you for not hating me." Ha-eun didn't respond with words. She just looked back at him, and in her eyes was the peace of someone who had ended a cycle. No apologies were spoken, but they both understood that life, in some mysterious way, had found its balance. The rain fell harder, but it no longer sounded like a lament. It was a blessing. The sound of the drops mingled with the laughter of children and the whisper of the wind through the vines. Past and present united in that instant, and the future, though uncertain, finally seemed clear. Ha-eun lifted her face to the sky and let the water flow freely, feeling each drop like an embrace from fate. The rain that had once witnessed her ruin now celebrated her redemption. The man who destroyed her was there, redeemed, and the woman he lost had learned to love in a new way, not with the blind heart of passion, but with the serene soul of someone who understands that true love also knows how to let go. Fate had fulfilled its promise. Karma, silent and patient, had given them both back what truly mattered, the chance to start over. Because the rain that once separated them was now the same one that brought them together, purifying what remained and sealing a new beginning. And so, as the sound of the storm became melody, the past dissolved completely. The cycle was complete. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell, and share this video with someone who believes in the power of time, forgiveness, and transformation. Because every soul that once loved deserves to be reborn with the rain.